Okay, so you just watched the first video for 8.6, which is where we learned how to solve quadratic equations both graphically and then algebraically. So now you should be going to the back side of that note sheet, and if you're feeling confident in it, you can just start working on these examples. But I'm going to start by walking through number 1 a little bit slower to review the concepts. Again, first we're going to solve algebraically, and then we're going to solve graphically. Okay? If you are just moving on, just make sure you come back and check your answers through the video at the end. Okay, so again, the first thing I need to do is get the x plus 5 squared by itself. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. I get 3 times x plus 5 squared equals 12. Divide by the 3 in front of the parentheses, and I get x plus 5 squared equals 4. So step 1 is accomplished. I got the square by itself. Having said that, I need to check to make sure I can do it, and since it is equal to a positive number, I'm good to go. And now my next step would be to solve by taking the square root. And again, because when I take the square root, the x plus 5 could have originally been positive, or it could have been negative, I have to say x plus 5 is equal to plus or minus 2, and that's when I break it apart. So if x plus 5 is equal to positive 2, I would subtract 5, then x would be negative 3. If x plus 5 had been a negative 2 instead, and I subtract 5 from both sides, then x was negative 7. So I have two possible answers. I get x equals negative 3 or x equals negative 7. So when I graph this, I should get the same thing. So first, going back to the beginning, I would graph a line at y equals 9. So horizontal line through 9. And then I have to find my vertex, which is plus 5 inside parentheses, so it goes 5 left, so to negative 5. And then the minus 3 originally would move it down 3. So there's a vertex at negative 5, negative 3. And now I have to start plotting extra points until I get the points that land on that horizontal line. I do that by doing a times 1 squared. In this case is 3. So first I'll do a times 1 squared. I get 3 times 1, which is 3, which means I go over 1 from the vertex, and up 3. So over 1, up 1, 2, 3, over 1, up 3. That doesn't hit it yet, so I do a times 2 squared. Again, so 3 times 2 squared is 4, which is 12, which means from the vertex I go over 2, up 12. So over 2 is 3, plus 9 is 12, so I actually do hit that line. And now I draw my parabola through it. And I get these 2 points of intersection, which the points were negative 7, 9, and negative 3, 9. So solving graphically, I get x equals negative 7, or x equals negative 3. So you can see I get the same 2 values that I got above. So that is good. Again, on the test, just like with absolute value, I would ask you to do one or the other. It's just good practice to do the same for both because you're checking your own work. Okay, at this time, I for sure want you to pause it and try numbers 2, 3, and 4. When you come back, I'm going to start by just giving the answers for those 3, and then I will take some time to walk through them. So go ahead and pause it, try number 2, 3, and 4, and then come back and check your answers. Okay, so again, you should have your answers already, and I'm just going to show what they are. For number 2, you should have gotten x equals 7 or x equals 1. Okay, number 3, you should have gotten x equals 1 or x equals negative 5. And for number 4, you should have gotten x equals 3 or x equals 1. So at this time, if you got all 3 of those correct, you can stop the video and move on and do your 8.6 homework, which again will be a great worksheet for reviewing some previous concepts and making sure you understand the new. Having said that, if you got any of these wrong, I do encourage you to continue watching as I will go back and work through each of them fairly quickly. Alright, so back up in number 2. Again, first I would solve algebraically by subtracting 1/3 times x minus 4 squared equals 3. Now 2 ways I can get rid of the fraction in front. I can divide by 1/3, but when I have 3 divided by 1/3, it's the same as 3 times the reciprocal, so it's 9. The other option, if you have a fraction in front, you could just multiply by the reciprocal right away. So I have x minus 4 squared equals 9. I have the quadratic by itself. It's equal to a positive, which allows me to keep going. I square root both sides. I get x minus 4 is equal to either positive or negative 3. I write those out separately. X minus 4 equals positive 3. X minus 4 equals negative 3. And I solve. Add 4. X equals 7. Add 4. X equals 1. So you can see that I did get the x equals 7 or x equals 1. If I was solving graphically, I would graph the line at 4. Find my vertex, which is a minus 4 here, so 4 to the right, plus 1 means go up 1, so I go over 4, up 1. I figure out my a value, which is the number in front, which is 1/3, to a times 1 squared, which is 1/3 times 1, which is 1/3. So I actually go over 1, up 1/3, which isn't very much. So less than half. Then I do a times 2 squared, which is 1/3 times 4, so I get 4/3, which is the same as 1 and 1/3. So I go over 2, up 1 and 1/3. Again, we can see that I'm not quite at that line yet, so I have to keep going. I'm going to do a times 3 squared, which is 1/3 times 3 squared, which is 9, which is 3. So I go over 3, up 3. And you can see that was that key I needed to get to. So I did have to go a little extra on that one. Draw my parabola. And once again, I'll use some red to show those critical points. I got the point 1, 4. And the 0.74. So you can see again, I would have gotten x equals 1 and x equals 7 as we got. Alright, number 3, let's look at the work for that one. I would subtract 10 first. I get negative x plus 2 squared equals negative 9. Divide by negative 1 to get rid of that negative. I get x plus 2 squared equals positive 9. So the fact that that switched from negative to positive was important because now I can solve it. Square root both sides. I get x plus 2 could have been positive or negative 3. If it was positive 3, I would subtract 2 and I get x equals 1. If it had been negative 3, I would subtract 2 and get x equals negative 5. So you can see I got the 1 or negative 5 like we had gotten. When I go to graph it, again, that horizontal line is at 1. My vertex would be at negative 2, positive 10. Go back 2, up 10. Now I know my a value is negative 1, because that's that number in front. It's a negative, so it's a negative 1. And I start my process. A times 1 squared is negative 1 times 1 is negative 1, which means I go over 1, down 1 each direction. Then I continue on. A times 2 squared is negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. So I go over 2, down 1, 2, 3, 4. Still not enough, so I have to do a times 3 squared. It's negative 1 times 9 is 3 squared. I get negative 9. So I go over 3, down 9. And we can see that that is my important point. I can stop there, draw my parabola through those points. But again, my key values would be this point at negative 5, 1, and this point at 1, 1. And so we would have had x equals negative 5, x equals 1, like we found. Last but not least, the last example. Again, getting the square by itself, I would subtract 4 from both sides. I get 2 times x minus 2 squared equals 2. Divide by 2. X minus 2 squared equals 1. It's equal to a positive, so I can keep going. Square root both sides. Oops. X minus 2 could have been positive or negative 1. If it was positive 1, I get x equals 3. And if it had been equal to negative 1, then, oh, that's a 2. I get x equals positive 1. So you can see I got those values. And last but not least, if I graph it, I would graph a line at 6. Find my vertex, which would have been at positive 2, positive 4, so 2 right, 4 up, over 2, up 4. My A value in this case is this 2, so A is 2. A times 1 squared is 2 times 1, which is 2. Which means I go over 1, up 2, over 1, up 2. So actually in this case, you can see I only needed that first point. I still have to try to draw a kind of curve that wasn't a very good job, but it'll keep going up forever. So I get the key point 1, 6, and 3, 6, which means my answers are x equals 1 and x equals 3 like we found. Okay, so hopefully those examples helped you understand everything you needed to be able to do. Again, your homework for tonight is the 8-6 homework. And so when I come back on Monday, you should have your 8-1 through 8-6 homework complete. Thank you. Have a great weekend.